Hey guys, I'm the 50s Kid, and behind me is a 2004 Ford Crown Victoria, and it's got the 4.6 engine that is in a lot of Fords. It's in the Crown Victoria, it's in the Mustang, it's in the Ford, it's in some Ford Explorers, and it's also in the Mercury Grand Marquis, Lincoln Town Car. And this engine has kind of an infamous problem. The intake manifolds were made out of entirely out of plastic, and they actually have a coolant passage on the front of them. And usually, you know, like either the gasket will fail where the coolant enters that passage, or sometimes they'll melt a little bit. I've seen that happen. I've replaced one of these already. There's an aftermarket part that's made by Dorman. They're the only ones who make it, that has aluminum. It has an aluminum coolant passage on the front of it, which is a little bit better. I'm going to basically take you through how to change one of these intake manifolds to that upgraded part, or replace the gasket. All depends on what this particular car needs. But I'm going to take you through all the steps just so you can see it in video, in detail of what to do and how to do it. The problem with this vehicle is that it's been losing coolant, and I believe that it's losing coolant down in through here. This is, first of all, I want to point out that that this is the intake manifold, this black, the black plastic that you see here, and on the earlier models of this part, this coolant passage, which you see right here, this is actually aluminum. It was actually black plastic on the very first, on the earlier models of this intake manifold. Ford finally wised up and they started making their own, upgraded part with this aluminum channel on the front. The Ford gaskets are this like one-piece gasket that runs all along each particular side of the intake manifold, so one on each side, and there's not a lot of room for compression in the actual gasket. I'll kind of show you what I mean once I get the gasket off. If you're going to be replacing yours with a Dorman manifold, the Dorman gaskets are completely different. They actually have individual gaskets around each intake port and around the two coolant ports up here, and then there are two more other ports back down there. The cool thing about that Dorman part is that it comes with a lifetime warranty. So if anything ever goes wrong with it, you can go and you don't have to pay for it again. Like I said, I believe that coolant, it's actually leaking from the bottom intake manifold gasket, and you can tell that's leaking because, look on this side. The timing chain cover is still kind of newish. You can see the aluminum on it, but over here it's covered with dirt all down here, and that's because it's been leaking. And then on closer inspection, I can see a little orange there, a little gold. That corresponds to the color of the antifreeze used in this vehicle. And also, hopefully it'll still do it. It was doing it earlier. If I squeeze the upper radiator hose, you can hear the air just kind of squeezing out from around there. Okay. And now if we come over here and look towards the back there, we should be able to see it's a little wet right around that area. That's the actual gasket. So if there's coolant on top of that black piece right there between the aluminum and that black piece of plastic, I'm not so sure that this intake manifold can be reused. We're going to have to examine it a little more closely once we get it out, and then we'll go from there. Once we determine that. I think what I'm going to do is back this car out of my garage and just kind of hose it down, because it's pretty dirty, and I think I want to make things a little easier for you guys to distinguish and recognize. So I'm probably going to hose the engine down and let it dry overnight, because I'm going to do this job in the morning. This is the car after I just washed it down, and what a difference that makes, huh? Wow. Okay, so I know it looks daunting, but we're basically going to split the job up into three major parts. The first part is we're going to get the throttle body assembly off. The second part is we're going to take off the fuel rail with the fuel injectors and the coils. And the third part is we're going to take the intake manifold off. That's how I like to think of it, three major steps. So step one, I'm just going to take off the air intake, the top of the air box, and just this whole air intake boot assembly. The air sensor here. There are two hoses plugged into the back of the air intake boot. One just pulls off like that, and the other is an elbow that actually runs to the PCV valve, which connects down in the crankcase right here. Those two just pull out. Then you can wiggle that free. It looks like this is bolted in with one bolt down there. That's an 11 millimeter. I'm gonna put that fastener back where I found it. That way I don't kind of lose track. If I can put it back, I will. And we'll set this aside. The throttle assembly is held on with 5 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a 5th one in back here. So my goal is to kind of get the hoses off. Some of these are cracking, and we might end up actually replacing them. So I'm gonna try my best to carefully get them off, but if they need to be replaced, we'll go get replacements. But for the most part, I think I should be able to get these off. I'm gonna use a little bit of silicone spray to make that easier. Just get in there, kind of lift it up a little. Spray some silicone in there. I felt my screwdriver just go in it. Well, never mind. The front just came off really easily, so that took care of that problem. So there's this sensor cable back here. I think this is the throttle position sensor. There's another sensor in the back here, which I believe is part of the PCV system. Don't quote me on that though. There's a metal clip holding a hose on here. It's probably a vacuum hose in that case. I'm gonna come in here and grab the hose, see if I can twist it. That usually breaks it free. Then I'll shove it off. And this one little hose here looks a little cracked. This hose in the back right here looks a little cracked to me, so I'm gonna do my silicone trick. Same thing. Come in here and try to twist it, break it. And yeah, it's twisting and ooh, pops easily right off. Again, you're looking at this assembly itself and you're seeing what's connected to it. There's a sensor right here. There's looks like there are 2 grounds on this. I think there actually might be a positive and a negative. This is a ground. So the ground goes on top on this particular vehicle. Actually, those might be vacuum tubes. I wonder whether, yeah, those are like vacuum tubes. Yeah, see, push down on the front of it. That releases it. Most harnesses should be keyed, but that's not always a given. So if you're afraid that you're going to forget what goes where, just label them. But for the most part, I've found on cars that harnesses are only about as long to connect to the thing that they're supposed to connect to, and there's nothing else in that area that it should connect to. The real difficult part is going to be what's called the EGR, the exhaust gas recirculation valve. That's what this is, the EGR valve, and behind it there's a rigid metal tube that runs down and is going to connect to one of your exhaust headers. So here's a better view of the EGR tube. Like I said, it's on this car the tube is protected by this braided line. In some cars it just won't be. This is the rigid metal tube right here. This is the nut that you kind of have to try to get off. And these are the 2 bolts that you would have to take off if you can't get that nut free, and you just have to take the whole entire assembly off. On this car, there's a bracket right here, which is kind of blocking my wrench's access. So I'm going to remove it. There's a 10 millimeter nut. I'm going to disconnect the 2 throttle cables from it. And looks like there's another nut where I can't see it right there. So that bracket's out of there, and well, I bumped you, but looks like I got it. And that's a happy day, because we don't have to possibly replace any gaskets. But like I said, if you need to, just 1 bolt here, 1 there, and this whole thing will come right away, and it'll just stay here while you take the throttle assembly out. It'll kind of be in the way, but you'll see that this metal pipe is going to be in the way anyway, and we're just going to have to sort of work around it, and I'll show you how. I'm going to take that spring off. I'll just leave it. Well, I'll take it off for the time being. The cruise control cable just kind of pops up. All it does is snap right down on there. And the throttle cable, you just peel it down from around like this, and you move it up, and then it slides right out of this little slot right here. There's a little slot right in the side. That's it. And we will unbolt them from this little bracket right here. These bolts are 10 millimeters. So we just lay the throttle cable aside. And it's kind of good that we did that because I didn't even notice this harness down here. So the whole throttle assembly is held down with these 5 8mm screws. The other one's back behind here. You'll see it. There we go. Just like that. We'll set that aside. The next step is to remove the alternator. You don't have to do this on every one of these jobs, but the reason we're going to do this is because the EGR, this rigid metal tube of the EGR is actually in the way. So if we don't have enough room to angle the intake manifold up and over the alternator, this, because this is in the way, then what we need to do is remove the alternator so we can just kind of slide the intake forward and then pull it out. Just slide it past so it has clearance. On this one, like on another job I had done, I was able to actually loosen where the EGR was connected to down on the exhaust manifold, and that gave it enough play that I can kind of move that out of the way. But rather than, it's kind of difficult to get at it on this car, so rather than do that, I'm just going to take off the alternator because it's just easier. So in order to do that, we're going to take off the bracket. This is the bracket that's holding the alternator on the top, and then there are two bolts in the bottom of the alternator. And we're also going to take off the belts. And I'm also going to take this bracket off just because I want to. Good. On this car, there's actually a little graphic of how your belt is supposed to be routed. Not all cars have that, and if they don't, and if you're afraid you're going to forget this, just take a picture of it with your phone. That way you know how it goes. But over here, I'm coming over here, and I'm just noticing that there's a belt tensioner right here. And at first I was looking for, a bolt that I could grab on with a socket. Didn't find that, but I did find this little square hole right here. That happens to be where you would stick a 3/8 inch ratchet. So we're gonna put that in. I'm gonna use a breaker bar in this case. Push that all the way on, and we're gonna tilt to twist clockwise. And I'm just gonna take the belts off the top of the alternator, and we're gonna let off tension. And that's it. And we'll probably leave the breaker bar there because I don't see another reason to use it. Now, since we are disconnecting the alternator, we are going to disconnect the negative terminal of the battery. Why? Because if we take the positive cable off the terminal of the alternator and we let that touch any metal frame on the car, we're going to short circuit the battery. You're going to get 100 amps flowing through everything. You're going to get a lot of nice sparks, and that's not good. So that's not really safe at all. First, we'll just take off this bracket on top of the alternator, and it's just four 10 millimeter bolts. So we'll remove those. Keeping our bolts on our little magnetic tray here. It's always handy. I kind of keep them to help myself. I keep them in like little groups of the order in which I did things. That's, you can work how you like, but that's how I choose to work. So we're going to take that bracket out of there. Oh, it looks like it's actually attached to the well, that's, what? It's a good time to disconnect that little sensor back there. Yeah, so you just kind of slip your pocket screwdriver in back of it and pry this back slightly, and you'll get it off. And then to get this, we'll again use the pocket screwdriver to So I'm going to peel back the rubber boot here and expose the nut. That should be a 10 millimeter, and we can remove that as well. Should pop out. Oh, they're a little strong. So we'll set this sucker aside. So now we'll come in here. I'm going to move this belt just out of the way. And we're going to remove the 2 bottom bolts. They're also 10 millimeters. So here, a little tip here. I like to just, yeah, like you were doing, bang on it. That kind of impact, that simulates that impacting action if you can impact it. And that just kind of helps you crack a bolt free and prevents you from stripping a bolt if you can. It's always a good thing to do. Actually, let's leave that bolt in there while we're at it, because we might need to do something. We'll see in a second. There you go. Crack it, and you got it free. And it looks like they might have done something really easy on us here. They might have just made this a lift out. That's the one brilliant thing I've seen Ford do. I'm gonna remove this bracket back here. It's a 15 millimeter. Big long one. There's probably another bracket or another bolt down here. I'm gonna unhook the throttle cables. I'll move these aside. Just gonna tuck them down over here for now. It looks like there's another 15 millimeter bolt on the back here, and I've kind of slipped a deep socket onto it with a ratchet, and I'm able to get it and just get it free. It's a pretty tight fit, but I'm able to do it. And it looks like I don't have to remove this housing. This is probably going to be the hardest, most annoying part about this job, by the way. So that's the bolt that you need to remove right there, and why the hell there's a stud on the end of it is beyond me. You know, I guess Ford can't be perfect in all of their engineering, you know, otherwise they would actually be a good brand. And this bracket is still stuck onto the wiring harness with this little white clip here, which should just sort of pull out. But no, made that work. And there we go. From here, what I'm gonna do is disconnect some miscellaneous lines that I see, some vacuum lines is what I believe these are. And I'll probably do my little silicone trick here. Pop that line off. There's also another one down here. Okay, pops off. I'm just gonna set that aside. There's a negative ground on the fuel rail, on this back post on the fuel rail. That's what this is. Just lift that one off. Disconnect this little harness here. There. This is a coolant temperature sensor, I believe. On some vehicles, this is going to be actually a rubber tube, because it goes to I think it's a heated PCV valve. And in those cases, in all cases, this is something that threads into the port on the front of the intake. So you'll just take off whatever you have and transfer it to the new intake if you're changing your intake. All right, so now I'm gonna disconnect the fuel line, and I'm gonna stuff some rags down here to catch the dripping fuel. There's a little clip on the end of it that just kind of holds it on in case of emergency. And you need a quick disconnect tool. These are made out of plastic, and they sell different kinds of tools for this. They usually sell a pack with all different sizes. This actually isn't quite the right size, but I did use it last time on this size line, and it ended up working. It did the trick. So I'm going to kind of cover this just in case some fuel squirts out here. And you see how I slipped it down underneath there. And now just a little bit of fuel is dripping out. So it's dripping down onto the rags. So you can see there wasn't much pressure in the system at all. The pressure had been relieved. This is just the fuel that was in the line. Don't smoke when you're doing this. Be smart. In other words, don't have any open flames or anything that will ignite. Otherwise, it's just a solvent like any other. Every other solvent you use, brake cleaner, all that's just as flammable. Not quite as flammable, but still flammable. Okay, so now we're gonna take the fuel rail off, and it's just these 4 fasteners right here. We're gonna remove those. I'm gonna disconnect the wiring harnesses from all the fuel connectors. And while we're at it, if we can get at them, these black connectors for the coils, there's a little clip on the end of them. So right here, if you just press on this little clip, that should release them. Before we go any further, we're gonna make sure that we get our compressed air. If you rinse your engine off with water like I did, this is where you come in here and spray and get all the water out. You can see that dirt that came out of there. And all I'm gonna do is kind of rock this back and right around and pop it out. And I got that one. Now we can pull the rail with the injectors out of there. And then I'm going to set it upside down over on my table. There we go. Look at how far we've come. So now we will, we're going to take off this heater hose back here. It's got a little clip here. We're going to come in and pinch the clip and kind of move it up. They let you do that. And I like these because you can just lever from underneath. Pop something off like that. Now we're going to come in here and remove the coils. There's one bolt on each coil. To get these boots out, you got to be gentle with them. What I like to do, these ones were particularly delicate and they had a tendency to split apart, so I'm kind of grabbing down below, just kind of pulling a little bit. And then again, we want to keep these in order, so I'm going to put them on the ground, just kind of in the order that they go back on the engine. So we're almost home here. We're going to remove the two 10mm nuts. These are really long nuts that go all the way down through. These actually hold the intake manifold down. These are part of the bolts that hold the intake manifold down. There's going to be an O-ring. There's going to be a thermostat with an O-ring on top of it. You could use a screwdriver for this. I'm going to use a little pick tool just to kind of lift it out. Good time to replace your thermostat. They're so cheap, you might as well. And we're going to try to keep straight. We basically got two on the rear that we're going to need to get at. Looks like I need a ratchet just to get at these rear ones. There we go. And that's it. Looks like it's free. And it also feels like there is this wiring harness is connected to the back of the intake. I don't know why. It's one of these little white clips. And now I'm not going to be able to lift the harness higher than this pipe, and that's why we took the alternator off, so that we'd be able to lift up and kind of pull outward. Just like that. So this cracked sort of insulation on the bottom of this is actually like a sound shield, basically. If you have a knock sensor right here, this sound shield is basically just to prevent that knock sensor from getting false readings. If you're replacing this with the aftermarket Dorman part, you might not be able to fit the sound shield back on, so you'll just have to leave it off in that case. I'm going to shove just some paper towels into the intake ports, make sure nothing gets in there. When I take these out, I'm going to blow them out with compressed air, but I just want to make sure that, nothing falls in. The rest, these are the spark plug holes. You don't need to cover those. And these back here are coolant passages. Now I'm going to remove the actual gasket, because believe it or not, that's what this is. This is Ford's rigid plastic gasket that has these rubber gaskets, I suppose, molded into the plastic. We're definitely going to be replacing these if we reuse the OEM part. But if we end up going and getting the aftermarket Dorman part, Dorman's the only one who manufactures an aftermarket replacement. And that one's going to have just the gaskets by themselves. and the Dorman's going to have little channels on the bottom of the on the bottom of its intake where their rubber gaskets fit into. The Ford one is just completely smooth because this is sandwiched between it and the head. But if we get the aftermarket Dorman one, it's going to be completely different. So the two systems are not compatible. So if you're going to go and buy a set of gaskets like these OEM gaskets, and you end up needing the Dorman part, you're not gonna be using these OEM gaskets. The Dorman part's going to come with gaskets. So I would wait until I got my car apart before I decided what to do, because you don't know if it's the gasket that's failed or if it's the manifold that's failed. What's actually happened is this part has failed. As I said, even though the coolant passage is aluminum on the top, it's still black plastic on the bottom. I don't know why. But it looks like there is a little rubber gasket inside a channel, and then there's plastic that's supposed to be on the outside of that channel, and that plastic has cracked, and it's probably somewhere inside the cooling system right now. We took off these bolts here, and here. We can take off the aluminum channel, and I'd be able to show you that O-ring that's supposed to fit inside of a little channel right here, and that's why this part has failed. So we're gonna go out and we're gonna buy a new Dorman replacement. I'm pretty sure that in almost all cases you're gonna need to replace the part. So as you're cleaning stuff off, you might be tempted to get like maybe a razor blade or like a gasket scraper or something like that. I would not recommend using any metal tools on the cylinder head here. You don't want to scratch it up. You don't want to mar it. That's why I'm recommending solvent, a good non-polar solvent, because that's gonna dissolve the grease in the crud, and you'll be able to just kind of wipe it off with some paper towels. One thing you could use is some steel wool. This is like ultra fine, and you can just kind of use this to buff away the corrosion, any of the gunk. We're gonna blow out the spark plug holes while we can. Okay, so we're not gonna reuse that sound shield that was in here on the old intake manifold. The new manifold is just shaped a little differently on the bottom, and we're just not gonna be able to reuse it. But Dorman doesn't actually sell, or nobody actually sells, a replacement for it, and that kind of tells you something right there. You don't really need it. People aren't telling them they want it. They're not having problems with that knock sensor, so it's not really an issue. Make sure you read the directions that come with the Dorman. We got this sheet. It tells you the torque specs and the order in which you're supposed to torque these bolts down. Really nice thing is the kit came with a new thermostat. That's cool. New O-ring. And depending on your coolant header, it might not press down all the way. So they give you, and I think that's the case with us too, they give you a little spacer so that you can get it seated all the way down and it won't leak. We've already moved this sensor over to the new Dorman part, and the part comes with these little plugs, 2 of them, to plug up those passages if you don't have any sensors at all. There's another passage over here because on some vehicles they have something back here. This vehicle only had a sensor there, so we put the sensor in, we moved it off the old manifold, and then we put one of the plugs in there. We had 1 here, 2, 3, 4 in the back. It looks like we got a space for this one. We reviewed our footage and we remembered that this bracket basically goes right here, and we had a really long bolt that goes down through that hole. You probably are not going to have this bracket if you're doing this on a different car or a different, maybe even a different model year. It just all depends. So I'm just going to go ahead and start these bolts, start them on the threads before I start tightening anything down. I just want to make sure that none of the threads strip. I'm just going to run the bolts down. You'll know on your instructions there are 2 torques, or 2 torque stages. The first one is 18 inch-pounds, which basically just means hand tight, and stage 2 is 18 foot-pounds, which we're going to use a torque wrench on. And the torque order is actually written on it's actually stamped into the plastic of the housing. So just in case you get confused, you can kind of see which order to go in. So we got one over here, barely until it goes down. 2. I'm gonna leave 3 out in my particular case and jump over to 4. And then 5. Up here is 6. And then 7's in the back there where I can't get at it with my, I'm kind of cheating here with all my universal extensions. But why else have them if you don't use them? Here's 8. 9's here. 10 and 11. Now we're going to torque all the bolts down to 18 foot-pounds. Always good to grab one of those Harbor Freight, you know, multiple extensions things for $7 or $8. Okay, so we're just going to put the spark plugs back in. You just kind of got to push them down on. They'll seat down on there. We're cleaning them off as we go. The kit comes with new bolts. They're self-tapping. They look like this. There are no brass inserts for machine screws, so these cut into the plastic. They're still 7mm screws, so they're still a stupid size. Don't use an impact to do this like I'm doing, because unless you really have some experience with it, because it's really easy to strip the screws that way. I'm doing it because, well, probably because I'm stupid, so I'll start doing it better. These are just basically holding the boots down. They're not pressing them down. They're just kind of holding them in place. So you only need to get it so tight. You don't have to go crazy. And I just decided that I lied earlier. I'm gonna keep using this. Don't drop anything in this intake right here. So we're gonna put the fuel rail back on. I've cleaned up around the bottoms of the fuel injectors. Slip this underneath here where it was. And I'm going to seat each injector just kind of by swirling it around as I'm pressing down. You want to make sure that you have a good seal. Alright, the instructions say to start these bolts at least 1 to 3 turns and then tighten them down. The instructions say to get these tightened to about 5 to 7 Newton meters, which is about 8 to 10 foot-pounds. I'm a little nervous about using a torque wrench on bolts that are cutting into plastic, to be honest with you. So I'm just kind of gonna do these hand tight, just by feel. I know when I'm kind of overdoing it. Now we can go ahead and hook those things back up. Hook up the coils and the fuel injectors. We got our vacuum harness that came over and went right about here. Remember, this line came back and plugged in here, and these lines plugged in here. This one, I believe, came under the rail. Either came above or below. I believe it was under it. And hooked on below that right there. So now it's time to put on that rear crash bracket. I'm going to thread this bolt on where it's supposed to go. So I got it located. And now I just got to put this really stupid one on. That was where I needed a long, or deep socket 15mm. Glad to say I'm having no problems hand threading this on. Back here with that deep socket 15 and just tighten it down a little bit. Don't need to go crazy with that. Feel for the hole and snap it in. And tighten it. torque it again to 18 foot-pounds because that's one of the intake manifold bolts. It's very important to torque these because if you over-tighten them, you're going to crush the gasket, and the gasket will not seal properly. And if you don't tighten them enough, the gasket will also not seat properly. So go get a torque wrench from Harbor Freight for 10 bucks with a coupon. I'm telling you, you'll thank me. Always store your torque wrench at 0 so it doesn't lose its calibration. Reconnect this vacuum line here. I'm going to reconnect the heater hose. One of our bolts for the fuel rail was actually supposed to be this, and our ground cable actually slipped down onto it. So I think what I'm going to try to do is take the self-tapping bolt out and replace it with this one. I remember doing this on the last engine I did as well. I remembered that these machine screws seem to tap their own way into this plastic just as well as the self-tapping screws did. So I think it's okay. Let's put this clamp back down on the bottom where it was. Now, did everybody remember to note which one goes where? Me neither. All right. Drop our alternator back on. The manifold comes with a different bracket depending on your application, and the old bracket may or may not be used. It looks like for this application we can use it. I remember on the, I think I did a Ford Explorer, we were not able to use the bracket as it was. The Ford Explorer bracket was a little different, and we had to use, I think we had to, because the bracket, the rear bracket mounting points were in a different spot, so we had to drill holes in this original one, the original bracket that it came with. The kit actually comes with some spacers if you need those, so you should be able to figure it out. But here, we're lucky. We can just pop our bolts back in. This was a 15. It's as tight as it needs to be. Looks like I can put that wiring harness back where it was. That's a 10. I'm going to reconnect the fuel line to the fuel rail. Just snaps back on. Pop the clip back on. Okay, I'm going to put the belt back on. This is why I didn't take it off, because now I don't need to remember how it goes on, all these pulleys. It's just right here. There we go. So we're going to put the throttle body back on, and you can see there, it's actually pretty dirty inside there. And, you know, it can stand to be cleaned. I actually don't have throttle body cleaner, but I have carburetor cleaner. It's the same thing. So I'm going to use it. I don't actually have much left. Hopefully I have some. Enough. Just going to pop right back in place. I'm just going to try not to damage that gasket. I don't want it moving around. Putting it right where the EGR port is. I'm gonna start the actual EGR to like threading back in, because that's what's gonna be difficult. That sounds nice. And then I'm gonna put these bolts in. That back one, the 5th one, is actually, there's no threaded insert for it, so we're basically gonna be tapping that one ourselves as we drive it in. Since there is a gasket on this, there are torque specs. Torque these down to 7.5 foot-pounds. These are the only ones you need to torque down. You don't need to torque down that fifth one. This is where the gasket is, and this is what's important. The other one just kind of, it's there to steady it. And now we'll just connect things back up. These two vacuum tubes went here. This went back here. Sensor connector. There's this vacuum tube that comes from this assembly up here, but it slips onto that port on the back right there. Throttle cable. And because I put these fasteners back in where they were, I'm less confused about which fasteners go where. Reconnect the throttle cable. It slips in through there. Just like that. Cruise control cable just snaps back down on. Now we're going to put our spring back on. We got some electrical connectors back here. These went into the intake boot. Rags out of there. I think I'm going to switch where I have these throttle cables just because. Put our big air tube assembly back in. PCB well on the top. Mass airflow sensor reconnected. And we basically have one bolt that we need to put in here that's probably still on the old manifold. Tighten down this hose clamp. Definitely don't want to forget to tighten up this EGR tube if you took it off. I'm doing it now because I've already attached the throttle assembly. There's also a bracket. And we've got two of our original screws, which are going to become self-tapping screws. Actually, to tell you the truth, since we have these two self-tapping screws, which we didn't use from the fuel rail, and we actually got two extra along with the kit, so I think that's what they intend those extra two for. So it actually comes with 6 of these. You use 4 of them for the fuel rail, and you'll use two of them for one of these brackets, depending on what brackets you have. Now we're gonna do. We had a special bolt for our bracket here. It actually just went in down there. So it's one of our little double studs, and we're gonna have this one self-tap its way down as well. And we had our little nut. That just holds the resonator on there. And since we didn't use the 2 original bolts for that bracket, we used the self-tapping ones. We don't need these anymore. On a job like this, best to double check. Look and see if you forgot anything. Are there any tubes hanging? Any wiring harnesses you didn't get? Okay, we'll go ahead and reconnect the battery. It's an 8. You lied. Might be a good opportunity to check the battery. Good chance to pop open these covers if you have a non-maintenance free battery. Check your electrolyte levels. If you can see the lead plate, add distilled water, not tap water, distilled water, so that you can no longer see the lead plate. We're pretty good on here. You kind of want to make sure that all the levels are the same. And I'm looking down in here and they're pretty good. All good. But this is a good maintenance item that people kind of forget nowadays. And it doesn't hurt to do it. It definitely helps to do it. Time to add the coolant back in. We're gonna reuse our coolant because it's absolutely fine. There's no rust or corrosion in it. It's not milky or hazy or anything. And whenever I reuse coolant, I always just use a paper paint filter here, just in case some things had landed in my open coolant container. Just a good policy, I think. Make sure you had closed your drain petcock. Give it a second to trickle through. Nice thing about reusing your coolant is you know exactly how much you need to re-add. Basically everything that's in the drain, in the tub. We'll kick the engine on, let it cycle a little bit, then we'll open it back up and add the rest of the coolant in. Moment of truth. Oh, kick it off, kick it off. It is leaking. All right, I've drained out some of the coolant. I'm just going to pull that spacer. I honestly, I don't know if that is what we need to do. The old thermostat was completely flat on the top. This one has a little bit of a lip right here. You know what? It looks like maybe the lip is where the new thermostat is, where the O-ring is supposed to go on the new thermostat. Why else have a lip if not to seat the O-ring in it? So I'll just install it like that, and we're going to see if that does the trick. I think that will, because when you're pressing down on it, I can't see why that wouldn't seal just as well as the old one sealed with the O-ring on the top. And that's why I put the spacer in there, because I can tell that this thing is not seating down all the way. Sticking down a little too far. So that's how I'm going to reinstall it. I'm going to add the coolant back in. All right, now we're going to kick the car on again and make sure it doesn't leak. Okay, so it's still leaking, and basically the instructions say if this is 7.5 millimeters or larger, then you do need to use a spacer, and I just measure that with my calipers, and it's just under 7. So we're going to try not using it, even though it looks and feels like it needs to be used. We're just going to drop the thermostat down in there, and I'm going to put the O-ring back over top of it. That's the way the old one was. And we're going to bolt it down, and we're going to see what happens. And perhaps my eyes were just deceiving me. I mean, maybe that is the way it's supposed to go, even though it didn't look or feel that way. All right. Don't forget to add the coolant back in. All right, we just ran it, and now there are no leaks. So looks like that was the issue, no spacer. My fault for not measuring it. You go ahead and measure yours, or you'll be sorry just like I was, and you'll have to drain your coolant 3 times. And that's it. Later.